I'm going to go ahead and tell you about the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome tonight, everybody. I want to welcome you this.
There's no PA.
Thank you, Andy. I want to welcome you to this work session, and this is a pilot project that we're undertaking from an audio perspective. That was where this started, where folks had complained they could not hear well in our planning auditorium. The work session is different from our agenda setting and our voting meetings, which are more formal affairs. Work sessions typically include the presentation of material that has a great deal of detail, and votes are not usually taken at work sessions. It's just a discussion. When we wanted to look at a better way of delivering audio, this room is obviously outfitted with the proper audio-visual equipment. In talking with the mayor, I think the plan is to do a work session here, and at the end of the month, February 27th, to try that out. Return to the planning auditorium in March and try that audio out. And then I think the mayor plans to assign it to committee to see the relative merits of either venue. And so that's the plan here. And we have a full work session. We had to break it into two this month because of all the things that are going on. So we've got some good information, and we're going to be respectful of your time. The first presentation is on the comprehensive plan. You have been accustomed to a 3 to 5 minute presentation by Brad as updates monthly on this. This is different. This is the actual presentation, discussion of the draft, so this is going to be a bit more involved. And so I'll turn it over to Brad.
Okay, thank you, sir. And we're not going to be real long with you tonight, but as you all have seen, I've been coming monthly and just kind of giving you a 2 or 3 minute update on what we've done for the past 30 days, where we've been, the meetings we've held. We're at that point now where we're very close to having our steering committee, who their authority is to recommend to the mayor that the draft is in a state of being forwarded to the regional commission and ultimately to the Department of Community Affairs for their process review. That comes in writing from the mayor based on a recommendation from the steering committee. But I'm going to have Gavin Hassemer come up and give you a little more detail this evening because we're kind of at that point now on schedule. Gavin's been a project manager all the way through on this, and I was very, very skeptical when we started this process that we were going to make it on time, but I think we're going to make it on time. So with that, I'll have Gavin come forward. He's going to give you a little fairly brief presentation, and then we'll entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Good evening, everyone. As Brad had said, we are nearing the finish line on the comprehensive plan. The due date for the comprehensive plan is end of June 2018. That gives us roughly 5 months to complete it. Now, I think the heavy lifting has been taken care of. The steering committee actually met last Wednesday and received public comment at their second official hearing, which is required by state law. And although we were looking for a recommendation that evening, the recommendation was to at least table it until next Monday night. So the steering committee will meet once again next Monday night. There will be a public input session yet again. And I think at that point, any issues that were highlighted last week, Wednesday, hopefully will have been addressed. And I think we'll have a recommendation going forward at that point. But where we are, very briefly, the complete draft is available online on the Planning Department website. We've had various iterations of it posted on the website. The latest one having come directly after the meeting last Wednesday. What we did is we decided to take the comprehensive plan, and based on the public input that we received last Wednesday night, it was really around 7 areas or 7 topics, if you will, of concern from the public. And those topics were poverty, affordable housing, equity, employment, communication, youth development, among some of them. And so what we did is also on the website, we've posted a 1-page tutorial, if you will, that highlights each one of those topic areas and color codes them throughout the document, so that if you are looking for anything in the document that talks about or mentions poverty, for example, we have highlighted that in red, every single sentence throughout the document. Same for affordable housing and equity and so on. So I feel like we did what the public asked us to do last Wednesday. We had that posted last Thursday, immediately after the meeting, and so it's been online this past weekend, and it will continue to be online through next Monday night's meeting, and even after that, to be honest with you. And we are still receiving public input, written and online, from anybody interested in doing so through this Thursday. And the reason we say this Thursday is so that way we can at least get it out to the steering committee this weekend for them and their recommendation next Monday night. We will still take verbal comment at Monday night's meeting if anybody has any. But very quickly, we feel strongly that our document exceeds the minimum requirements of the state. The entire document has gone through, like I said, many iterations, and I think the final draft is in the format that you see highlighted with the bullet points. It has a vision statement for the entire community, and then it's broken down into 15 topics, same as Envision Athens. And each one of those topics is briefly described, followed by identified needs and opportunities. Those are really the ideas and obstacles that we have highlighted in the community that either need to be addressed or are something that we should expand upon. Based on those needs and opportunities, the committee formatted a single goal for that specific topic. And in order to achieve that goal, we developed strategies followed by actual policies. The next element is the community work program. So even though those aspirations are highlighted throughout the needs and opportunities, the goals, strategies, and policies, how do we actually achieve them in real life? And that's where the community work program comes in. Those are identified projects with estimated funding and sources of funding for the first 5 years of the comp plan. Now, not every single goal, strategy, or policy is going to be addressed in the first 5 years. Quite honestly, we have almost 100 items listed in the community work program for 5 years. I think, quite honestly, it's going to be a lot of work for the first 5 years. But I don't want anybody to worry, and we've tried to stress this enough, that just because that item that you see is not listed in the community work program does not mean it will not necessarily have one in the next 5-year cycle. So that's kind of how it works. We have to give a report card after the first 5 years and then come up with a new list, and we'll go through it all again. The reason for the different colors on those bullet points is the goal, the policies, economic development, transportation, and housing. Those are all elements that are included in the comp plan, but they were pulled from different documents that had already been completed. So we actually pull our goals and our policies directly from Envision Athens. The economic development portion is required to be the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission Economic Development Plan. Same with transportation and Maycourts, and housing with our consolidated plan for the federal government. I won't go over this too much. I think a lot of you are familiar with Envision Athens, but I think what I'd like to point out is that even though technically Envision Athens and the comprehensive plan are two separate documents, they always have been and they were meant to be, I look at them and I think the marketing on the comp plan needs to be that these are really two volumes of the comprehensive plan. If you will, Envision Athens is volume 1, and it takes a broad approach to the community versus the comprehensive plan, which is volume 2, that gets specific with what the local government can do for the community. And so I just wanted to stress that point. And again, if you kind of get a visual of it, with Envision Athens in the middle, we really are the first example of all the major agencies that were involved in Envision Athens to be able to say that we have come out with a document that really matches and supports the items of Envision Athens. And I think we're right on task with that. Like I said, we've pulled directly word for word some of the items from Envision Athens into the document. And again, briefly, in terms of engagement, we built upon the efforts of Envision Athens. Over 1,200 participants in Envision Athens, over 8,600 comments, written, verbal. From there, we didn't want to discredit that effort. That was a strong effort with strong input for the very same questions that we would have sought as part of the comprehensive plan. So rather than try and duplicate that, we built off of it. And so we took that, we ran with it. We also had our own mobile stations throughout the month of September where we passed out information on the comprehensive plan, started survey work. We were at the West Broad Farmers Market one Saturday. Multiple times at the bus station downtown, as well as Southeast Clark Park, just to get the word out and start surveying folks. Then we also had 3 various public presentations, 2 of them at schools, 1 of them at a local church in October, where we asked the public to participate with us. We had boards out, we were scribbling on boards, ideas and things like that. So that was a good effort on behalf of the public in October. Finally then, in November and December, the steering committee took it upon themselves then to take all that public input and start to draft the document itself. And that's what they were working on throughout November and December. In January, we started having some more public input sessions and public awareness about the draft coming out, and that's really where we're at right now. In terms of a future development map, this is one key element of the comprehensive plan that really starts to stand out. And it is a requirement that we address future development map in the document. However, the way that the steering committee has chosen to do that this time around is they've decided that really after 20 years, and quite honestly, the basis for this map is 20 years old. If you were to pull the 2000 map, it's not going to look much different than what you see in front of you right now. So what they've decided is that we really need a comprehensive rewrite of the entire map. And they want to undertake that and have put that in the document as a work program item, hopefully within the first 5 years. But to give it the attention that it deserves and needs, it was not something that we could accomplish in 5 months. When you're talking about over 42,000 parcels of land and really starting to affect the development and the growth of the county for the next 20 years, that was going to be a separate effort. And so what we did with this time around with the comp plan is we've really cleaned up a couple of incompatibilities with the map. And although we had a version that originally focused on Hawthorne Avenue, West Broad, Baxter Street, and Oconee in terms of changing those from what is a more, I guess, a lesser intense category of Main Street business, we did come out with a version that upgraded those, if you would, to more general business, which is more intense to reflect the conditions that are on the ground right now for the past 20 years. Through public input, over the last couple of weeks, we decided to go back to Main Street business in those areas. And so that is an issue that we'll tackle with the map as a whole, hopefully if that becomes a project in the next 5 years. But right now, those areas have been turned back, and that is the steering committee's direction as well, is to keep those areas Main Street business. So very briefly, schedule-wise, again, I said at the end of January, we started to market the document. We held a week-long open house in our auditorium. Anybody could drop by, talk with staff, read the document, look at maps. On January 9th and the 30th, we also held specific public presentations where staff tried to educate everybody about the document itself. It is a fairly large document, and so we tried our best to give a little tutorial on how to read the document and some of the elements that are included in it. And then last week, on February 7th, is when we had a formal public hearing with the steering committee, received a good amount of comments. There were almost 50 attendees at that meeting, and we got a good amount of speakers. And so we ran with those comments, and I think the document that's online right now reflects the changes that they asked us to make. And so hopefully next Monday, we will again take public input and have a formal steering committee meeting and have a recommendation. From that point forward, in March, really, at the beginning of March is what we're looking at, is to have the mayor execute the transmittal that, with the recommendation from the steering committee, that just forwards the document on to the state. It is not an approval of the document. It is simply the next step in the process for the state to begin their review. After the state has completed their review, which could take a few months, we will get the document back. You all will have your turn to hopefully formally adopt the document, and there will be a public input session at that meeting, as is typical for your meeting. So by no means is next Monday the end of the document. It's just the next step in the process. And again, through at least the end of business this Thursday, we are taking online and written comment, and that is simply just to get it to the steering committee in time for them to read it. Otherwise, we encourage everybody to attend the February 19th, next Monday night meeting, if they would like to speak in public. And again, the document and all its related information is up online at this time. And that's it, so thank you.
Anyone have any questions of Gavin? Commissioners?
Gavin, one of the, I forget which slide it was, but one of the earlier slides on the things that were of interest to people, one that was listed was education.
That's
Could you
correct.
explain that?
Yes.
Do people think, I mean, is this related to, top 3 topics, education, land use, economic development?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, what we decided to do is, again, to keep within the effort of Envision Athens. Education is a topic that's part of Envision Athens. There were 14 topics in Envision Athens. We have 15. We added government services as our 15th. But what we felt strongly about is that even though this is a local government document and we can only commit to what is our responsibility legally as a local government, and we've tried to make that as clear as possible throughout this process, that doesn't mean that those topics are not important to the public, as clearly indicated. I mean, we asked people to mark their top 15 topics, even though this is a local government document, and they still listed education. And the feedback that we received from everybody is the acknowledgement that although Athens-Clarke County is not in the field of education, they would like to see stronger partnership and stronger commitment for those items that we can assist the school board with. And so they're not expecting, obviously, a replacement of the school board in terms of Athens-Clarke County government, but they are wanting, and it's highlighted throughout the document now, some of the ideas the public has with respect to what we as a local government can do to help assist in any way we can. Not necessarily financially, but whether that's through marketing or just general partnerships with the school district, that's really what that indicates.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? for Gavin?
All right, thank you.
I'd like to add, there's another component of the comprehensive plan, or something that happens at the same time, and that's the service delivery strategy. That's something that Gavin's also helped to put together. And if you'll remember, in the late 90s, there was House Bill 489, which required counties and cities to negotiate to make sure there wasn't a duplication of services or double taxation. And so Gavin has helped to pull that document together. It's fairly sizable. The mayor and I met with Mayor Terry Glenn of Bogart and Mayor Dodd Farrell of Winterville to review it. There was only one item that got any protracted discussion, and that was paving, and how to, Athens-Clarke County, by the past service delivery strategy, is responsible for the maintenance of some section of Bogart and all of Winterville. Both of those are independent jurisdictions and choose to receive funds directly from the state that we also receive. So in doing that, the way that we fund our paving is through some general fund capital, some local maintenance improvement grant, LMIG, from GDOT, and some SPLOST. They both have their own SPLOST. They both have their own LMIG. And so quite simply, we resolved to give them their fair share of general fund, but they'll be expected to kick in some of their LMIG or some other source equivalent to, and however they want to fund their portion of it. And we used pretty much the LMIG equation to determine what was fair. And so they're reviewing that right now with their councils, and that would be the last piece of that, that you would also be asked to approve, is a service delivery strategy for the next 10 years.
Any questions, anybody?
So that would be a new general fund commitment from the unified government to those two municipalities?
No, sir. We've been, maybe contrary to some opinion, we have been maintaining those roads. As everyone knows, we tend to invest in other services as well. We try to make pavement last as long as possible, hence the black snakes, but we really try to stretch it. And we have given the citizens of Winterville, who are Athens-Clarke County residents, as well as some portion of Bogart, the same treatment as we've given the other citizens. So it's just really
They're
being
part of that master list.
more specific about their share.
Okay, kind of defining what we're doing already in some ways.
That's right, exactly. Being more clear. Okay. Okay. The second item on the agenda is a report back on the scope from the Inclusion Task Force. And if you'll remember from the report, it was recommended that the mayor appoint a group to try to pull together a scope to develop a plan for diversity, inclusion, and equity for the community, even beyond the government, and to come back to you just to check in to say, hey, this is where we're heading, to get any feedback from you. There's not a resultant agenda item associated with this, and it's imagined that the group itself will select the consultant to begin the work. But they wanted to check in with you and get your feedback on where they're headed.
Thank you. Good evening. The Mayor's Task Force on Inclusion and Equity is chaired by Mr. Grady Martin, and I, of course, am the county liaison. And our purpose this evening is to review the history and the progress of what we've been doing since we came together as a task force, and also to discuss the proposed scope for the RFP that will go out for the facilitator that will guide the task force in the rest of our time together. Here's a list of current task force members. Again, our chair is Grady Martin. We have ex officio members, Dr. Means from the superintendent of Clarke County School District, Ms. Michelle Cook, UGA Vice Provost of Diversity and Inclusion and Strategic University Initiatives. She likes for us to say the entire title. No, I kid you. Of course, the Assistant Manager, Robert Hiss, and then I serve as the staff member. Here's the history of how we came together. I don't think anyone in this room has forgotten. And here's what we've been doing to date. So our first meeting was on September 25th, and here the mayor presented to us her charge, and we went through that charge in great detail to make sure that everyone understood and that everyone was committed to serving on the task force. Then we met in October and had Ryan Moore, the director of the County Economic Development Department, to present economic development, but with a lens of equity and inclusion, and specifically, what does that mean in Athens-Clarke County? So we'd allocated 30 minutes for Ryan, and he ended up taking the entire hour because there were so many questions from the group. We thought it was key for all the task members to at least be on the same level ground. You know, we all come together with different passions and different commitments, but how much do we really know factually about Athens-Clarke County? So Ryan was the first presenter of that sort. And then we met in November to begin working on developing the task force scope, and we had to continue working on that in December, as well as developing the criteria for the request for proposals. And our last meeting was January 23rd, where we reviewed the proposed RFP criteria. And there was plenty of opportunity for input, and the task force had opportunity to read it outside of our meetings. On February 27th, Dr. Means will present on the state of the Clarke County School District, also from the perspective of equity and inclusion and what that means in Athens-Clarke County, but based on the facts, not just the fears. And then in March, we'll have a presentation on equity and inclusion by Ms. Annalise Singh, who's the UGA Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which is different somewhat from what Dr. Cook does. And on April 24th, Chief Freeman will present factually on crime and policing in Athens-Clarke County, again with the lens from equity and inclusion. Here's our general charge. The Mayor's Task Force on Inclusion and Equity has been charged with working with a staff liaison, which would be me, and now the already named chair, but a to-be-named facilitator and consultant to develop strategies and ultimately a plan to make Athens-Clarke County a more welcoming and inclusive community. That is not an easy task, but I do believe that everyone on the task force is committed to working through the process. Here's our scope generally. We want to have a facilitator who is familiar with Athens-Clarke County, but not just to come in and redo the work that's already been done. We all know all of the work that went into Envision Athens, but in addition to that, we have the manager's report that helped bring together the task force and the need in the first place. We have the Network for Southern Economic Mobility, the Athens Wellbeing Project, the Economic Development Department, and so many other documents and initiatives that are already in place. So those are not to be ignored, but they are to be incorporated. And the facilitator will then use that information in addition to his or her own knowledge and help us proceed in reaching our primary outcomes, which are to develop and draft a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for Athens-Clarke County, of course, with emphasis on economic mobility. And that was a decision that the task force came to collectively, that ultimately the goal is upward economic mobility. And I don't think anyone disagreed with that. The plan will include mechanisms not only to implement the recommendations, but to come back and monitor progress and to report that progress to you all, the Mayor and Commission, and of course to the community. Next, we plan to request the RFP and have it released next month, and the proposals will be due at the end of March. The task force will make final selection the following month in April, and then the facilitator will begin to engage with us throughout the fall of 2018. The task force will draft recommendations with this facilitator's guidance, and we will present that to you all at a future work session. And then an agenda item with recommendations will be presented for your approval. Now, clearly, we don't want to proceed without input from you and any concerns that you may have so that it can be addressed and we can make sure that we're proceeding in the way that we should be proceeding, and so we don't come back and report something that's not useful.
Any questions or comments for Deborah? Melissa?
Yeah, is zoning and land use issues, is that within the scope of the RFP? As far as, I mean, historically, zoning and land use have been used as tools for segregation and segregated neighborhoods, which trickles down to segregated schools. Is that going to be part of this RFP process?
So we didn't specifically state we need a facilitator that will come and address zoning and land use issues. We didn't say we need a facilitator that will address educational issues or poverty issues, but we are specifically stating that we need a facilitator that will be knowledgeable about Athens-Clarke County and its lack of diversity or ways of improving diversity, working on inclusion and equity, so that all of those things will come together from members of the task force. So we've not yet itemized or specified the key issues that we want addressed. We need someone who's trained to help us identify those issues. And I want to stress that Ms. Singh actually is very trained. So she will come before the facilitator starts so that we'll have some very key ideas of where we want to go, and then we'll present that information to the facilitator who will help us organize and word it in such a way that we can present it to you.
Ms. Kelly?
Deborah, is it anticipated already that either the task force or some successor body will continue to monitor this work in the years ahead?
That is the plan, and that is anticipated to be one of the recommendations so that this doesn't end when the task force is disbanded, if in fact we are. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Kelly, I think we're going to look to the group to help us understand what that might look like. So our third item of 5 tonight is something that you see each year about this time, and Deborah is going to present where the work that staff has done with the Vision Committee to make recommendations to you on how best to allocate the community development block grants funding that we get from housing and urban development in the federal government.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. I do want to acknowledge that the HCD staff is present and all of us worked on this. And I also would want to very briefly acknowledge Centerica Davis, who is our new administrative assistant. She started yesterday and understood how important this process was, so she is here with us this evening. We'll quickly review the consolidated plan and our strategic plan, and we'll explain to you the process of how we got to these recommendations this evening, review the CDBG proposals and the funding recommendations, and then where we go from here. Our consolidated plan is a requirement of HUD's, and it is a plan to help communities determine where CDBG funds and resources should be properly and best allocated. And the plan is also a needs assessment and a review of resources. Athens-Clarke County has 4 strategic plan goals listed above, with the primary goal and the priority goal being business and job development. Business and job development includes providing job skills, training, ESL classes, GED preparation, assisting with job placement, providing business plan assistance, and providing capital loans for small businesses. We are also required to have citizen participation in the consolidated plan, and here in Clarke County, we utilize the Vision Committee, which advises the department on the consolidated plan and the annual action plan, which goes to HUD, and the projects to be funded by CDBG. And the current Vision Committee met this year on January 22nd to review the FY19 CDBG recommendations. All members but one were present at that meeting. Here are our current Vision Committee members. This year, we received 29 applications totaling a request of $1.6 million, $1,641,897. I would be ecstatic if we had that money, but we don't. But however, this is what's been requested for FY19. For FY18, the current fiscal year, we were allocated from HUD $1.18 million, $1,187,911. So we used that same amount to allocate for FY19. So that means we're hopeful to receive at least what we received this year. And here's the breakdown of those funds.
Deborah?
Yes, ma'am.
Did we get more applications this year than last?
Last year, I think we had 32,
Really?
and this year we had 29.
All right, thank you.
And here is how we anticipate allocating those funds. As usual, the primary or the largest portion of our allocations goes towards affordable housing. So for FY19, we anticipate 47% of those funds being allocated to affordable housing. Now for the fun part. The first section is affordable housing, and you all received the more detailed allocations of these funds, or the proposals, the detailed summaries and proposals. We received in the affordable housing section 5 applications from Action, Athens Area Habitat for Humanity, Athens-Clarke Heritage Foundation, Athens Housing Authority, and Athens Land Trust. And the project names are listed. The funding requested is also listed, and then what we are recommending. In the last column is the indication of whether Vision Committee supports the recommendation. And in the affordable housing section, Vision Committee supports recommending funds for all 5 applicants. The next is going to be economic development and neighborhood revitalization plans. In Athens-Clarke County, as you're aware, we have 2 neighborhood revitalization areas, the East Athens and the Hancock Corridor, and they tie into our microenterprise and economic development section. So here are the applicants in this particular section, which include Athens Land Trust, East Athens Development Corporation submitted applications or requested funds for 5 different programs. And then Goodwill of North Georgia also submitted an application for 1 program. And listed before you are what each organization requested, what we recommended for funding, and whether or not Vision Committee supported that. If you'll notice here, we have no's, whereas we didn't have any no's before. So for 3 of East Athens Development Corporation's application, Vision Committee did not support the recommendation, and neither did Housing and Community Development Department. But we did recommend funding for Athens Land Trust, as did Vision Committee. We did recommend funding for Goodwill in North Georgia, as did Vision Committee. And we did recommend funding for East Athens Development Corporation's Operation One Family at a Time nursing assistant training program. as well as the Youth Enrichment Program, which is the Athens Tutorial Program, and the Chesson Community.
Deborah, if the priority is job development and business, why were those not selected?
So job development is definitely a priority, as indicated. Goodwill of North Georgia also meets that requirement to tell you where it is supported. Today or this year for FY19, we are not supporting recommendation for these programs for multiple reasons, the most being that the application was insufficient. Secondly, capacity was not well documented in the applications, and Vision Committee members expressed strong concerns that we could not ignore. And some of those concerns really evolved throughout conversation, and we had to give it the amount of time and recognition that it deserved. Public services is the next section. And of course, we have a mandatory 15% cap from HUD. So we can never exceed the total amount allocated from HUD by more than 15%. The challenge grant process was implemented by Mayor and Commission some years ago. And so agencies are limited to $20,000 for the first year. And if the agency receiving $20,000 the first year remains eligible and meets all criteria, then that agency is eligible for $20,000 the second year, and then that's reduced to $15,000 the third year. So our renewal grants were Athens Area Homeless Shelter, Athens Community Council on Aging, Athens Nurses Clinic, Casa de Amistad, Family Connections, and the ARC UMOC. And Vision Committee has recommended funding for all of our renewal applicants, as does the Housing and Community Development Departments. And those amounts, again, are fixed.
Deborah,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. So none of the new, there wasn't any money left to give to any new projects this year?
There
Oh,
was,
I'm
and that's
sorry.
coming next.
Oh, I
That's my
see it.
next
I'm
slide.
sorry.
Yes.
I see it.
So we had 9 applicants, new challenge applicants, and these were really great thoughts and ideas and theories behind the applications. I do want to stress to you that we did not ask applicants, new applicants, to just figure it out. Just go do it on your own, submit an application, and hopefully you'll put in all your criteria. We had a notice of intent meeting, and every single potential applicant had to attend that meeting and sign documentation. And so they did. And then we had an extensive period of time to provide technical assistance, and we did. We actually mandated technical assistance at least one meeting with every applicant. And sometimes people follow suggestions and recommendations, and sometimes people forget. And so in some cases, we were lacking mandatory requirements from HUD. In other cases, there was insufficient capacity. In other cases, there was just documentation that prohibited Vision Committee from making an informed decision. And so of all of the new applications, only 2 were supported by Vision Committee, which were Action Inc., which is Achieving Career Excellence, and then the other was Prevent Child Abuse. HCD does not support funding for Prevent Child Abuse Athens, but HCD does support funding for Action Inc.
And why was that?
Prevent Child Abuse Athens the application was lacking some key information that we need to be able to report. It did tug at the hearts of the Vision Committee members. It tugged at our hearts. Who doesn't want to prevent child abuse? So it is not the department's position that we don't want to prevent child abuse, but there's some mandatory information that we have to be able to support and to report, and applications must include that information for us to consistently apply the same standard across the board. And I do want to point out that Action Inc. applied last year, and we did not recommend it for funding. Neither did Vision Committee, but they reapplied this year with that key information that they were missing, and here you are. Housing counseling was also an application submitted by Athens Land Trust, and it was supported by both Vision Committee and the Housing and Community Development Department. Again, this year, we've had an application for public facilities and improvements. So this is an interesting area of funding for land that is actually owned by a public entity, a county or city, that HUD permits funding to help support. And so Leisure Services Department has submitted an application for the Nellie B Trail project. And initially, the funding request was $95,450, and the documents submitted supported that. But what we have done in the past and what we did last year was take any remaining funds to support this particular project. Last year, there were no funds remaining, and so Leisure Services has resubmitted the application with both support for the full amount and support for $45,329, so that there'll be all of what was included in the initial application was eligible for CDBG funding. But the $45,329 was an alternative because the $95,000 is not very realistic. And our next steps. On March 20th, we will, of course, be subject to the agenda-setting meeting, or be an active, willing participant, not subject to the agenda-setting meeting. We will.
Could we go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
So the advantage of Leisure Services, which is a Athens-Clarke County department, asking for this CDBG money is that, well, I'm going to answer my own question, is that it's federal money that's available for a project like this. Is that basically what it is?
Yes, the primary advantage, sir, is that it wouldn't have to come out of the general funds because it actually qualifies for federal money
Right.
to support it. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't the census tract that brings community development grant money to Athens is the reason why?
301 and 302.
You
Yes,
have a
sir.
question, Melissa?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yes.
What precisely it is?
So there is a path in an area actually that leads, it's almost just community develops. People have just created this path. It's nearly treacherous and very dangerous. And it's highly utilized between the community, the East Athens Dance Center, the community center, and the neighborhoods. And so it's overrun, it's, I don't know if you've ever been out in that area and seen it. It's dangerous, it's muddy, it's not well lit, it's not lit at all. And so this would be an opportunity to actually pave, and I don't know if paving is the right term, I know that paving is a technical term, but to pave it and then maintain it so that it's safer. It's utilized throughout the year, but even more so during the summer months. If we're able to put that in there under the newest budget, yes, ma'am.
Perhaps creating an improved surface would be a good thing to say instead of paving.
Of paving, I know it's fun talk. So creating an improved surface.
Surface.
Yes.
Something better than mud.
Yes.
Ditches and gullies.
We will publish notice for the public hearing and 30-day comment period. That is the HUD requirements. And then we are asking for the vote on the April 3rd Mayor Commission voting session. And then thereafter, based upon your approval, we will submit the action plan 4 to HUD for approval. And that action plan just lists what's been approved for funding, and we submit it to HUD. And then HUD sends us back an approval. And then prayerfully, July 1, 2018, will receive our allocation of federal CDBG funding.
Questions or comments, anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Is there any concern that you might receive less money? And what will you do if you do?
There is always concern that we may receive less. Last year, we received less. And to be honest with you, there's already been information released. The president has released his budget to Congress. And again, this year, just like last year, is calling for elimination of CDBG in home, which is the same situation we were in last year. So we always encourage all of the agencies to work on becoming not self-sufficient, because these funds are needed and they can't just come from thin air. But the goal of CDBG funding is not to carry the agencies, it's to support the agencies. So right now, our first step is to write our legislatures and make those calls. And then alternatively, we would have to come back to the government because those funds are not optional for us. They are fairly mandatory.
Anybody else?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is something that happens once every 5 years, and that is where we go out to bid for our insurance and service renewals. And this is spearheaded by the Human Resources Department, Safety and Risk Management. And with us tonight is Jeff Hale, HR Director, to review the recommendation for that, which will come to you via agenda item.
Good evening. Thanks for your time this evening. I want to first acknowledge a couple of people who've done a lot of work on this process that started back in September. LaWa Howard serves as an interim risk administrator, and she's done a lot of heavy lifting and done an amazing job, and I just want to acknowledge her. James Britt is here. James has served as our consultant. He is a principal of Scarborough and Britt and has worked with our risk program for several years. So I wanted to acknowledge them. As Blaine said, we're here to complete the RFP process, provide you some history and an overview, as well as our recommendation, and ask for your approval. By way of some history, back in 2004, we entered agreement with GIRMA, the Georgia Interlocal Risk Management Agency. They are a pool for city municipalities that provide our property and liability coverages. So this is for basically all the insurance aside from health. So all the liability that springs from our property, our equipment, our activities, and our employees is what this program is designed to cover. And so we had successive contract awards to GIRMA up to present. Their contract will expire on May 1st of this year, and so we went out to bid. To kind of share with you a little bit about where we are before I talk about where we're going with this, I just need you to understand that the risk program, it resides in HR. There are 3 generalists and an administrator. They serve to manage all of these coverages, and they're the intake for all of the claims in the government. So every time we swap paint with a citizen, every time we have an accident, an injury in the workplace, these are the things that we're working on. We now insure a total insured value of over $700 million in property, equipment, and vehicles. So we have grown in size and complexity over the years. The costs of those accidents, those injuries, those things that we incur come out of self-funded dollars. So they're ACC dollars under the deductible. And so for claims, we're looking at about $1.2 million a year in losses that we incur in that fund. About another $1 million in premium costs to pay the insurance companies to cover us. So our total cost of risk is about $2.2 million, and that's the amount that we're seeking to manage down. And so we did go out to bid. We had a number of considerations. We were, of course, looking for the best value in the balance of coverage and price and services. In terms of coverage, we wanted comparable or better with comparable price and enhanced services. And in terms of direction, we've done a good job of administering claims, but we now have the capability of some data analytics with our new risk management information software that's been implemented. So we're heading in a direction where we'd like to actually manage this function. And we want to take that data and look at trends, provide our management team with information, and we want to promote government-wide ownership of safety and risk. In the same way that we've enculturated the organization with a culture of wellness to drive down health claims, we want to do the same thing with safety to drive down our other claims. And so that's the direction that we're headed, and we're looking for a hands-on, client-focused consultant services to help us and collaborate with us on that activity. So we received 7 bids in total. 3 of those didn't meet our criteria and were eliminated in the first phase. We invited 4 bids in to interview. There were the 2 public entity pools, GMA and ACCG. GMA being the incumbent, and then 2 commercial brokers or companies in Alliant and Epic. They were all invited to Phase 3, where they were provided data, loss history, and policies and procedures, and allowed to present proposals to us on coverages and services and price. Epic ultimately withdrew their bid as a result of some health issues with one of their principals, and so we were down to both the 2 pools and Alliant. As we ranked those proposals, ACCG is the corollary county organization to our incumbent. They really didn't provide anything new or different in terms of services, and the out-of-pocket costs would be higher, and we'd pay more in premium for the privilege, and so they did not make it to the finalists. We found that GERMA provided a moderate value proposition as our second place finisher. There were some things that were lacking in their proposal, specifically the loss control services over our status quo. If we're going to drive down claims and associated premiums, we need expertise, hands-on, collaborative work that we don't have in-house. And that simply was lacking. We do have to engage with separate commercial brokers to place some coverages that the pool does not offer. We also have we're finding that at our size, as I said, at $700 million in insured values, the pool lacks a little bit of flexibility for us. We are the largest member. And so, for example, their cap for property was $500 million. So several years ago, they had to adjust their cap just for us. So we were outgrowing the solution. They did present the lowest costs, but we have some concerns about the future pricing and their ability to sustain that given some of the history we've had. So in comparing the 2 that were remaining, Alliant and GERMA, this is a cost breakdown. It's a little bit awkward to try to present this, but what I want to draw your attention to is that GERMA's is a sort of wrapped up solution where everything rolls up into a one premium. There are several things that we have to spend money on separately that are out to the right, with our cyber excess coverage because the pool doesn't offer enough for us, and our drone coverage, which again is something that has to be placed separately. So those are some additional expenses on top of the premium. The net is that if you look at things that are included and excluded, the Alliance solution would be about $63,000 more. Of course, we're not looking at just price, but I do want to share that with you. Alliant did finish first in our ranking. In the balance of coverage and price and services, we did find that number 1, we've got comparable coverage and improved coverage in several ways. For example, business interruption. The GERMA pool is limited to $500,000 for business interruption. You can imagine our water enterprise getting knocked out by a storm and having to still deliver those services and the costs that might be involved in that. And so whether it be something like that or a cut in fiber optic cable that takes us down, those costs would mount fairly quickly. Storm takes out the lovely Satula Avenue address where we reside. You would, of course, want to put us in a much nicer place, and we would be wanting enhanced furnishings, and extra expenses would attend. And so what we're finding is in this coverage, we're looking at $100 million of coverage. And so price being comparable, we're finding several data points. Our cyber coverage would be increased, and we're seeing, of course, in the news, increased frequency and costs associated with breach and the aftermath of data breach, and we do have those risks. In addition, the loss control services that Alliant presented, they offered a full consultancy client-focused service where they're going to come in and essentially do discovery with us, going through our financials, going through our loss history, talking to random employees, talking to key operational personnel in finance and risk and across operations. And they will ultimately develop a strategic plan for loss control, and then guide us through the implementation of that with safety committee, with risk. And that is the proactive, forward-leaning kind of assistance that this government needs, because as a self-funded entity, whether it's on the health side or the risk side, we're vulnerable to large claims. And we need to be doing everything we can to avoid that, as well as drive down the frequency of small claims. And so that's what we're seeking to do.
If you get too far down the road.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just got a question that, what is drone listed under these coverages?
What is
Drone for $3,000.
So we pay a premium for coverage for the use of our drones.
So we actually own and use
We own
drones ourselves?
three. And for a government entity, those are particularly, there's a good bit of exposure. You can imagine a police drone that
Okay, so
privacy
when you said
issues,
that makes
damage,
sense, yeah.
damage of the drone. Yeah. Yes, sir.
This is a little bit off topic, but back just a few years ago, before we had drones, I suggested we need a policy to guide us in the use of drones. And now that risk management is an issue with that, it seems to me even more that we need a policy about how drones are to be used in our public safety department or leisure services or anywhere else.
We do have a basic policy in place that was put in place probably a year and a half ago. I don't know if it ever got.
It's not something we approve.
Okay, well, then it may not have gotten to that level. I'm not sure.
Well, let's not confuse the different policy terminology.
I'm talking
right?
about an ordinance.
Yeah.
Ordinance-based
Yes, sir.
versus
Understood.
insurance-based.
Yeah.
Understood.
Well, and let me distinguish between that too. So the FAA has some governing regulations on the use of drones, and we just did an administrative policy for staff use of drones. Now, are you speaking of a drone policy for the community?
Yes. Okay. I'm speaking of a policy for us about when drones can be used.
Okay. We do have something I can share with you on that.
All right, so it's just a policy you wrote, or?
Well, we actually had a committee, which included several department directors, airport director, fire, and I think maybe police was on there, and PIO, and they came together to say, exactly that, so that we had a uniform approach to that.
Sorry for the diversion,
That's okay, sir. It's a great question.
Melissa?
Yeah, the last time we were talking about risk assessment and insurance kind of stuff was when we were addressing our special events ordinance downtown. And one of the hurdles we saw that some of these nonprofits are having in hosting special events downtown is the cost of insurance. They have to have a pretty large insurance policy. And, some of us objected to that undue burden. Would this policy that we're considering, would that cover some of that insurance? Or could we get a policy that could cover those costs or would cover those entities under our policy?
No, we wouldn't take on the liability of other entities putting on events. We would assist them with potentially locating coverage of their own. The limits are set at a very specific to the event, and so there's not really a coverage that we would have available to us for that purpose.
So we couldn't tack a coverage mechanism onto this policy that might cover a certain number of large events a year or whatever?
I mean, our coverage covers Athens-Clarke County for those events and our role in them, but we would not cover the entity sponsoring the event.
But
That's their responsibility.
But we require them to have coverage.
Correct.
Andy,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you. So just to follow up on Melissa's question, so if there were an event that was being planned in which a department of Athens-Clarke County was involved, but not necessarily the sponsor of, could a rider be included on this?
To cover another entity, no.
To cover an event that an Athens-Clarke County
Yeah.
department was involved with, that wasn't necessarily the prime sponsor of?
When you say cover the event,
The insurance, the requirement for having insurance.
You mean a loss, a claim that we had against us?
mean, we're covered for that,
cover events,
that
they're
instance.
covered
We are
entities.
covered, but we would not be in the business of covering other entities for their activities because we don't have control over what they do.
So what happens if you have an Athens-Clarke County department that is working with with a non-Athens-Clarke County department or non-Athens-Clarke County entity?
If there's a claim could be made against us. There will be a determination as to whether we contributed to the liability, and we would be paying either out of pocket or through our policy for our portion of that.
Sharon?
Yeah, so a few years back, that we had information presented to us about uninsured motorists. Kind of curious if that was evaluated at all, because that was something that we had asked for, and we said, and we were told basically the bid was 3 years out. So what can you tell us about that?
We did, and thank you for asking. We do have some improved coverage under this policy to the extent that we maintain the current limit at $75,000, but whereas our current program provides us to pay a $50,000 deductible, the proposed program would cover the entire $75,000 and would not inherit any deductible. We did inquire into, I think Mr. Berryman asked us to look into up to $1 million, and that was not available at the market.
So we have enhanced what we had
We
under this
have,
program?
we
Okay.
have marginally, yes.
And is that for, what about at-fault drivers? Is it just, and I'm not an expert in this, but I know that the question was about uninsured motorists for uninsured drivers, but does that also cover at-fault drivers too?
When you
Or
say at fault, do you mean?
Claims where, if Blaine and I were in an accident and he had coverage, but he didn't have enough to cover me, but he was at fault, I mean, does that cover?
It could.
Is that,
Yes, it could.
okay, but up to 75,000? So if I was out 200,000 and he only had 25,000, y'all would cover another 75, I'd still be out 100.
Correct. Most vehicle accidents come in under the $50,000 mark unless there's just severe medical issues, and that, of course, happens, but.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. So we find that what we're going to get in terms of coverage is improved, in terms of loss control, consultancy and services is superior. And so the other thing I want to emphasize with you is that not only are they offering these services, but we certainly came back and said, that's a great sales pitch. What else do you have? And they offered to set a target of a 15% reduction in our total cost of risk, that $2.2 million per year. So over 3 years, they have put at risk 11% of their service fee, contingent on meeting that target, which says to us we have somebody who's going to be invested in our success. And the impact of that, we hope, would be improved workplace safety and public safety through fewer accidents and injuries, reduced losses, better experience, and in time, lower premium costs. And that's just like your auto insurance. If you have accidents, you have higher premiums. And we're hoping on a larger scale to realize that same thing over time. And we estimate that there's an overall savings of $300,000 per year over that 3 years. So for the extra premium of the $63,000 we're investing, we hope to realize almost $1 million over that 3 years in reduced losses and premiums.
Jeff, so if, I want to make sure I understand it. So they have set a target of 15%. If they don't meet it, they will forfeit 11%.
11% of their service fee,
of
which
their
is which their service fee is about $90,000.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Terry.
In past years, we've had 5-year contracts with these companies. Is this going to be a 3-year contract?
We would propose a 3-year contract with the option to renew in years 4 and 5. So it's up to 5 years, but we could choose after the 3rd year to go out to bid.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions before we move on?
All right.
Okay, our last item tonight, as far as the work session is concerned, is some project concepts for T-Splost with regards to the Oconee Rivers Greenway project. We've got some project concepts we're still focused on left over from 2011, but the Greenways Commission has met and wants to offer and recommend some additional project concepts to be considered with the remaining T-Splost money.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just to remind you, this is the project statement for Project 5 for T-Splost 2018, and it does call out that the previously approved SPLOST 2011 subprojects that require additional funding would need to be completed prior to pursuing the list of projects that are on the T-Splost list. Those projects do come from the currently approved Greenway Network Plan. So just to go over this, we are going to go over the project history with an overview, some review of the subprojects, the budget, look at the next steps, and then have a Q&A session. So in February 2017, the Greenway Network Plan was approved. That was the updated version. And then the Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission submitted the high priority projects for T-Splost funding, again, based off of a list found in the Greenway Network Plan. In August of 2018, Mayor and Commission approved the project list for the 2018 T-Splost referendum. The voters approved it in November. December, Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission recommended subprojects 7 through 11, and then in January, the user group approved subprojects, or recommended subprojects 7 through 11. So just to give you an update on this, the 2011 projects currently, this is a list of what's going on with those. You've probably seen in the past, there's the map that has the different colored lines. So the East Campus connector, that connector bridge, that's on hold, but you're seeing that that project is coming solely from SPLOST 2011. The Oconee Hill Cemetery, still in the land acquisition phase, looking at $300,000 from SPLOST 2011 with $900,000 coming from T-Splost funding. The Bailey Street connectors, that's Bailey Street and Carriage Lane, looking at a change order approval, that's at roughly $1 million from SPLOST 2011. And then the Greenway segment, we're under, that's a purple line, that's project 4.2. That is under land acquisition, as is the Research Drive connector. Bailey Street extension is on hold, and then the Barnett Shoals Road Carriage Lane connector is in land acquisition.
Can you update us on that change order for the Bailey Street Carriage Lane connectors? Is that something you can summarize or describe?
I can.
Somebody,
So that
thanks.
was a previously approved project concept and preliminary plans. And as you know, we use a novel project delivery method with the old wastewater plant there at College Station, whereby Public Utilities was replacing a sewer line, and we asked them for efficiency purposes, which I'll describe, to not only replace that line, but also hire the subcontractor within the same contract to come right behind it and put the Greenway right back on top of it. Now, how that saves us is that the grading was already done with the installation of the sewer pipe, and all the soil and erosion protection was put up as well. It could save us as much as $100,000 to $200,000 having done it that way, and I want to applaud the Public Utilities Department for doing that. Once T-Splost passed, and we recognized that there would be enough money to do the projects that T-Splost to finish up the 2011 projects, plus have some excess left over. This is considered one of the 2011 projects, by the way. The contractor's still on site. We finished I went ahead and asked them to finish the final construction plans, which is consistent with our process that we follow. And we are going to change order it into the contract while the contractor's there. So that will enable the project to be built very quickly. In fact, within the next few months, I think.
Okay, so this change order is in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
It almost reads as if there's $1 million change order.
It's $1 million of funding from SPLOST 2011 that we anticipate that it will cost to finish that connector.
Gotcha. But it's still going as we have already discussed. So the
Yes.
change is what we've been talking about, not a new
There's no
version of
change
it.
to the concept or the alignment.
Yeah.
It's merely a change to the contract. To
Right.
add that is some additional work for the contractor.
Right.
While they're on site.
Because it's looking good. You can go on that bridge and look down and see the progress. And I just wanted to make sure it was still moving forward. And I'm not catching where that's, when it says Bailey Street, which part of Bailey Street are you talking about? Because I'm picturing everything at the light where North Oconee Access Road is, in that field of UGAs where the water reclamation used to be. Am I picturing the right part?
Yes, it will continue on past the bridge.
Right.
Towards Carriage
Lane.
And it will, right there by the fraternity house, tie into that cul-de-sac.
Right.
And then it will wrap around that, it will surface the old gravel road that goes around the cemetery there
To the
and
dead-
connect up to Bailey Street.
So that's where the dead end of Bailey Street doesn't become a dead end for Greenway.
Right. You can
Traffic
think it on the
approved
Greenway.
versions.
And it ties the neighborhood in,
Transportation.
but it does not include a trailhead or parking or anything like that.
That's all right. There's some already there. Okay. Well, did that cover your question? Thanks.
Another question?
Yeah, Mel, just, and as long as the old ground is on the page, remind me the status of the federal funds for the bridge?
That one, I believe they are looking at releasing that for us being able to put it out to bid in April.
Well, where we are is the federal government, we had anticipated having it now. They have not formally allocated the funds to GDOT, which they expect. That's been delayed because of a lot of the flux that's going on. But as soon as that's allocated, hopefully in the summer, early spring, summer, fall, we've got all the approvals we need to proceed.
Those will be the most baton-passed federal funds in the history of this county.
I have a quick question about the cemetery yellow line. We've got about $1.2 million between the two different splosts. Is that just for land acquisition, does that include the actual trail building?
That includes actual trail building, and it's just that the status is that it's currently
Okay.
in land acquisition, but that is what's anticipated currently to construct the trail through there.
Thank you.
And we have opened those discussions back up to find some common ground.
No pun intended or pun intended?
I'll see if you
Pun accepted?
see if you see that.
So the purpose of this was just to kind of update you guys on where we are with SPLOST 2011 and these projects and what part of the T-SPLOST funding would be necessary in order to see these through. And the idea being that this $4.9 million from T-SPLOST 2018 is kind of going into a bucket. So even for those things that maybe we can't move on right now because they're on hold in land acquisition, we have our cost estimates for those, so we're setting that money aside, but we'd like to go ahead and start moving ahead with the next items on the list for the Greenway. And so that's where this gets pretty exciting because I got some fresh new things to show you. So looking at the sub-project overview, sub-projects 7 through 11, they're going to begin to establish that true Greenway riverfront, and that's adjacent to downtown Athens. And it's going to provide a safe, river-oriented connection between College Avenue and the new Easley Mill portion of the Greenway that's currently under construction. This is a very exciting connection. So this is your overview, and here is College Avenue Bridge where the existing Greenway lot is. This yellow line follows along MLK, and then you'll remember there was the Complete Streets project on MLK. This would tie in with that and continue on. Then we have here a bridge that parallels the bridge at North Avenue. We have a route that goes through North Oconee River Park west, and then it could cross the river, go to North Oconee River Park east. We also have an alternative route here along MLK. I'll explain this a little bit more as I break each sub-project down. And then you can continue on the Greenway, and here is another very exciting project where this is the underpass under the Oconee Street Bridge. So sub-project 7 is that connection under the Oconee Street Bridge. Again, this is pending GDOT action, but GDOT is discussing replacing this bridge, and as part of that project, we've talked with them, and they're on board with extending the bridge so that we can put the Greenway under there. So for any of you that have been out in that area, you know when you're trying to get over there, you kind of have to go around the world, and Mama's Boy and all those areas, and it's a bit confusing. This would be a straight connection under that bridge, connecting with that new section of Greenway that's going to be finished soon. So it will require a bridge across Trail Creek and probably some improvements to Fisherman's Walk. A lot of people aren't familiar with what Fisherman's Walk is, but it's the little sidewalk in Dudley Park that's next to the river. It's only about 6 foot wide, but people would want to travel on that, so we might want to look at some improvements there. So this is outlining what I'm talking about. Currently, if you want to follow the Greenway, you'll come through Dudley Park, you'll come here, cross Trail Creek, come out behind Mama's Boy, follow the sidewalk, cross Oak Street, come down the other side of Oak Street, cross, and I cannot remember, I think that's Oconee Street, it's where they start to blend.
Yeah.
And then go down there, and it's a bit of a hike. Well, I guess the Greenway is meant to be a hike, yes.
When you say follow the sidewalk, does that mean we're using the sidewalk for Greenway at that point?
That is correct.
So, will bicycles be allowed on that sidewalk? Because normally we don't.
Well, this is the existing connection.
But will bicycles be allowed on
Yeah.
the sidewalk?
On the sidewalk?
Because normally they're not.
They are,
Where
it's
we-
marked as Greenway.
Where it's marked as Greenway, they
So
are.
it's wider, and I think that
Does the
it's
state law-
marked,
does
because
the-
that's the only way we can connect the Greenway right now.
But does the
Do we
state
have
law
it
allow
marked
that?
someplace so people know it's okay to be on there?
Yes.
Is there signage there to let people know?
There's some of the signature stuff, but not specific signage through there. And I think that's part of where it gets a little confusing.
Andy?
Well, just, so our discussion back here is, state law prevents bicycles on sidewalks, but Mr. Attorney, can you confirm that this would be okay if it's part of a greenway?
Well, there are some sidewalks that run beside Mama's Boy that are not, clearly not wide enough to be greenway. I do believe the stretch that's in front of the Methodist church is wider and has a bollard on it and everything like that. So I think that would be suitable, although frankly, I'm not sure the legislature, when it passed that law, anticipated the difference between a greenway and a sidewalk.
But what about for areas where the sidewalk is not wide enough?
I'm pretty sure a bicycle wouldn't be allowed on that. It would have to be on the street.
My understanding that, and it might be local, but there may be an age difference that if you're under 12, that you can be
It's
on a
11 or
bicycle,
12,
but not an
something like that.
adult or over 12. That's state law.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people are gonna be over the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever it is, who are gonna wanna ride on this, and we need to figure out a way to accommodate that.
Well,
I don't think there's ever
They're
been a
not-
question on the Greenway, though.
yeah, they're not going to be riding on this anymore is the idea,
Yeah.
because this eliminates that.
Oh, okay. that's
So
what you're excited about.
Right.
that's what I'm excited about.
Okay.
I am not excited about having to go all the way around through here to get anywhere, but I am excited about the idea of going under the bridge to connect with the Greenway.
Right, so Madam Mayor, that is what is currently being done, and the red route is the preferred route.
new route.
And on the note of the width of the sidewalk, they are currently making the connection to the rails to trails on that sidewalk, so we maybe need to look at making sure it's wide
some
enough.
signage
Yeah,
and
to,
width.
to cross the street, to go up to the switchback, I mean, because that's being worked on right now. And if that's an issue, because we do want the adults who are on their bikes with the children who are allowed to be on the sidewalk, not necessarily to have to jump out
Push 'em.
in the road, but making sure that we're practicing good bike etiquette and legal.
But one of the overarching themes of this segment and these sub-projects is to eliminate the need, where at all possible, for street-based greenway connections and get people off the street. So that, that's very nice.
So on that earlier section on MLK, that's a change, isn't it? in the
It is a
design?
change. I'll get to that, and then when
All
I
right.
get to that specific one.
What is the ETA on the Oconee Street Bridge? Like, how long is it gonna be before that red line can actually happen if it's dependent upon GDOT?
They are in the
rebuilding that?
design phase.
So it's in the foreseeable future, like
Oh.
next couple of years?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Wow.
my understanding.
I
It
think-
depends on funding, but they are in the design phase and all of
FY
that.
'22 is what I've
Yeah.
heard the latest.
Wow. That's the fastest GDOT's ever moved.
They're moving a lot of projects right now.
Yeah, so
Are you about to change the plan?
unless you have a question about this one.
Well, I do.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a question. I'd like to point out something. Mel, do you know where the improvised landing is there at Dudley Park?
Oh, I'm very closely acquainted with
Do you mind
that.
just pointing it out? Because I've been talking to the commission about water trails.
It's right in here.
Isn't it up further?
It's right in this area.
Okay, well, there is a place that's,
Oh, wait, sorry, up
Yeah,
here,
that's what I
sorry.
was
Yeah,
talking-
I was
that's
in the
the
wrong spot. I was above, yeah, it's, so you come here off Cook and Brother and it's right in this area
Right.
here. Mhm.
now, just want to let y'all know, we've already got parking there. It's downtown park that we, is somewhat underutilized, in my opinion. But there is interest in there being a landing there, and I know that Leisure Services has looked into it some. But be a perfect location. There is a place that people already pull in and out, but it needs some work to make it better.
And the
And I
comp
just-
plan references that.
And we applied for the RTP pre-application for this year's grant cycle, so fingers crossed that we get approval for that, because if that happens, we'll be able to actually make that launch a reality. And that's a really nice, this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is a really nice section of river for beginner paddlers. It's very calm. You can paddle upriver, back down. It's very scenic. You see a lot of the important parts of the city where everything was founded. And it's really an unusual viewpoint because you don't realize you're right next to downtown when you're on that river. It's really beautiful, and it'll be a really exciting addition to the water trail system.
And there's already parking. There's already a very nice sidewalk leading down to that area. So there's a lot of infrastructure there already. When we were talking about this the other day, people seem to be thinking about other sections like out Whitehall, which of course needs, but this is one right here, downtown park that we're going to make much better. And there will be many more people going through the Greenway, so it's just an opportunity to do that with the water trail landing there. Just want to take the opportunity while we had the map up there. Thank you.
So sub-project 8 is College Avenue to North Avenue, and this is with the complete streets Greenway segment. So this is going to answer your question, Jerry. So you can see we have here the proposed route for the concept, and that does include the recently completed bridge that has the little stubs out for the Greenway. So we are utilizing those. Currently, we're not including this second option down here. We wanted to go this way, especially looking at the funding, because this is really the critical connection. This might be nice one day down the road, but this is really where we felt like was most critical.
Has this been to the Greenway Commission?
Yes.
Okay, what did they say? I don't remember it.
It went to the Greenway Commission. I actually brought it to them in two separate meetings, just to make sure, and the Planning Committee discussed it
Okay.
a few times. So they've heard me talk about this one.
So did the Greenway Commission recommend this?
Yes.
Okay.
And we talked about, this, connecting in this, just because of the funding and the requirements and everything. It was a discussion with the group. Subproject 9, this is Greenway Trail through North Oconee River Park East and West. This really begins to establish downtown riverfront. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with North Oconee River Park East and West, but it is, directly adjacent to downtown. It is one park that is bisected by the river. It's really, really pretty and underutilized and has a boatload of potential. So we do have an alternative, because we do have a second bridge there along MLK if it's necessary and feasible. So we'll look at this one. When I talk about connecting the two parks, that's this bridge here. That's not part of this sub-project. That's a later sub-project, but I'll get to in a few slides. But what we're talking about here, where the other sub-project ended, this one could pick up and go here, but we're not sure about the feasibility of going along MLK. The Greenway Commission and the user group prefers taking this route, but understanding that this bridge, in addition to this bridge, you know, there's a lot of conversations that would need to be had about that. But again, this is establishing that connection. So if this was feasible as an alternate route, this would be a great way to go ahead and connect us with the Greenway over here at Dudley Park and at Broad Street. Subproject 10, this is the first of the bridge subprojects. It's that pedestrian bridge that I discussed near North Avenue. It's similar to the street, or the bridge that's on Broad Street near Weaver D's. So again, here it is, just connecting these two. This one, from an engineering standpoint, should be a bit easier. And it is, you know, fairly straightforward going next to the existing vehicular bridge. The next one is the other bridge, which is the key connection for downtown Riverfront as far as connecting those parks, North Oconee River Park, east and west. So you can see here is this bridge. I think the engineering on it will be a little more challenging, but it is a really great connection, provides a whole downtown park. So that is something that we are interested in looking at in project concept. So budget breakdown. Again, we talked about the bucket, the different buckets for the SPLOST 2011 versus the SPLOST 2018. And so what we're looking at when we get down to it is we have about $3 million available for construction when it's all said and done. That gives us $1 million for Project 7, which is the Oconee Street Bridge, and that would be whenever GDOT's ready to move, we're ready to move. Budget for MLK College Avenue to North Avenue, that's $900,000. Then the North Avenue to East Broad Street, which is that segment along North Oconee River Park, east and west. And then that leaves us with $318,000 available for the other projects. So the next steps, we have an agenda report for February-March Mayor and Commission cycle, T-SPLOST Oversight Committee meeting, Mayor and Commission project concept approval in March, and initiate preliminary plan phase. Now, in the agenda report, we are recommending forwarding 7, 8, and 9 to the preliminary plan phase, but holding off on 10 and 11 until we have more funds available to pursue those. Questions?
I was just going to ask for that presentation in the format that's not with everything else on the agenda, just because it has my district in it, but it sounds like I'll have that with the agenda report coming pretty soon, which will have the same details. Is that right?
That's correct, along with an attachment with the map.
Yeah. And the colors.
And the colors.
To go with
We'll have the map of many colors and the new map of many colors.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Thank you, Neil.
Thanks.
Okay, that's it.
That's it for the work session. I believe we have another item.
Yeah, we have, and we do, we have an item that we're gonna have to vote on.
So you remember that should I do that? Preside over the meeting, or do you do it?
May I make the motion to move into special session?
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion second. All in favor of special session?
Aye.
Are y'all okay to just stay where you are to vote, rather than get up and move where? Okay, because we do have a quorum, but,
Harry, do we need to suspend the rules?
Yes, and she needs to do a roll call, so she needs to do a roll call, then I'll suspend the rules.
Yeah.
His last suspended.
I know, we wouldn't do
Well-
without him.
Gene, will you roll call for us, please?
Dickerson, Sims,
Here.
Link,
Here.
Wright,
Present.
Bailey,
Present?
Neesmith,
Present?
Dale,
Here.
Harrod,
Present.
Here.
Gertz, Hamby. And we have a quorum.
Okay, now,
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
have a motion to suspend the rules in a second. All in favor?
Oh, I should have let Harry do it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to try to do that on our own now.
Oh, man.
Of course, Commissioner Neesmith could withdraw.
I withdraw my motion.
Well, Madam Mayor, I move for suspension of rules.
Thank
I'll
you.
second that motion.
Have a motion second. All in
This is the
favor?
last time.
Aye.
Okay. Yes.
As stated in our last week's meeting, the reason for the resignation is to run for mayor of Athens-Clarke County. I do have a letter requesting acknowledging that I am resigning to run from the commission that will be sent. Each one of you have one at your place, as well as one will be sent to the governor. But in order to do that, we need to adopt a resolution for my resignation, and that's what this purpose of this meeting is. And I think everybody has a copy of that as well.
Does the attorney need to read that resolution?
No, but this is a resolution
For the-
authorizing the call.
Call of the
request
election.
that the Board of Elections call the
But-
special election.
It's called,
Do we have to accept Harry's resignation?
I think it would be, you don't have to, but I think it would be appropriate.
Okay.
and again, the purpose, the reason for me doing it at this time is in order for us to have the special election at the same time that we have the general election, so that we won't have a separate election, and it'll save the taxpayers a few dollars in the process. So that's the
So do we
reason.
have a motion for the
Madam
acceptance?
Mayor, you mind if I say something?
Not at all.
I would just like to commend Harry for the thoughtful timing of this. I know it's kind of difficult for you, but at the same time, you're doing something that's better for our community as far as the timing goes, and I really appreciate that.
I agree.
Yeah, I also wanted to highlight that there's, in the political climate in many arenas, there's a lot of resignations and people leaving positions. And they're not necessarily honorable departures, and this is possibly the most honorable resignation that I've heard of. And I will, by virtue of just being Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not real happy about this, but it is for all the best intentions. I make a motion that we accept Commissioner Sims' letter of resignation, and that we adopt the resolution for the purpose of filling a vacancy in the office of Commissioner and holding a special election.
I'll second.
A motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Harry, thank you again for your consideration of the taxpayers and the people in your district to fill this seat as quickly as possible.
Harry, would you like to adjourn the meeting?
Madam Mayor, I move for adjournment of the meeting.
Have a motion for adjournment, all in favor?
Aye.
Well, that was
Well, it's
sort
not
of, that was sort of
official.
illegal since we had just accepted your resignation, but we'll go with it.
Madam Mayor, he can adjourn the meeting, right?
Well, but he did, so let's see who's gonna fight that.
I think the attorney catches.
Gene, I got one to sign.
I had a question for you.
That's something.